Hello and welcome everyone. Good morning, America. Good afternoon, Europe. Good evening, Asia, and I guess good night for the rest. We are happy to welcome you in this session on building online learning communities organized by GBSN. I will introduce the three speakers that we have today, and then we'll start with the presentations and discussions. And don't hesitate to ask any questions using the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer them. So with us today, we've got Hélène Michel, who is a professor at Grenoble Ecole de Management in France. Hélène holds a PhD and a postdoctoral degree in management sciences. She's a specialist in innovation management with a specific focus on serious games since 2003. And her aim is to design games and game mechanisms to support innovation processes and inspire entrepreneurship. Hélène is an international expert on the topic of serious games, working for the European Commission, being a keynote speaker in many conferences. She got also some research funding from the MIT on this topic, and she won several awards for the games that she developed. So welcome, Hélène. Thank you to be with us. We also have Travis. So Travis Hunter is the Associate Director of the MIT Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, known as MIT RIP, and Travis engages with regional leaders to implement strategies that support their regional innovation-driven entrepreneurial ecosystems. And prior to joining MIT in 2016, Travis was the director of the Quincy Center for Innovation. So again, leading and supporting startups and also all sorts of private and partnerships with private and public organizations. And finally, we've got David Capodilupo has about 30 years of executive level experience in different areas in sales, marketing, process improvement with leading investment firms. And at the moment, so at MIT, David was appointed as the executive director for the MBA and Masters of Management Studies program, and is currently the assistant dean for the MIT Management Global Programs. So David brings a very broad experience managing global projects and with also related to investment and working with many countries, Malaysia, China, Korea, India, Russia, Portugal, etc., etc. So we'll bring also the international view on how to foster entrepreneurship and accelerate the development of entrepreneurship. So thank you very much. Welcome to the three of you. Thank you for participating to this session that I will do my best to moderate. We will start with Hélène. So Hélène, we are lucky because at the moment, Hélène is running a course which obviously is done virtually, but was organized to be done virtually anyway with students from all over the world and working on co-creation and innovation. So Hélène will show us and explain to us how it works so that we can have a live best practice. So Hélène, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you, François. So hello, everybody. I have a short presentation to try to give you a sense of what we are doing currently with different stakeholders. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I'm a professor and I'm also a game designer. Currently, what I'm doing is my annual gamification seminar. And what I would like to share with you is a practice, maybe a best practice, but still a practice on how we can create not just a learning community, but maybe a learning guild using gamification. To give you an idea, a guild basically is an association of people with similar interests or pursuits. For example, in the medieval age, you would have guild of merchant or guild of craftsmen. But in the world of game and video game, guild can be a team of players who are going together and to start a global strategy. They can gather only for a specific purpose, and then they will go back to their own interest. But for a very specific moment, they will collaborate together. And what we are trying to do during these months with different stakeholders is to create a guild with a very, very specific interest. So this is my current guild, you know, with different avatars and my students and different stakeholders. What is our pursuit? Today we are facing COVID-19, and my students, because I'm working mostly with a group of students, my 26 students are students in a MSc in Human Resource Management. They are going as human resource manager to integrate different challenges. One of them is occupational safety and health. How do we integrate these norms and practice in the organizational behavior? COVID-19 is challenging everything today. Instead of just trying to learn what it is about, we would like the students to create their own practices. So what they are doing is create virtual serious games to train different stakeholders, could be workers or employers. To do this, we are working with people, experts from the International Labour Organization, and we collaborate as a guild. So let's say that we have organized this guild for a specific strategy. We have split the strategy of COVID-19 in occupational safety and health in 3 subtopics. And each time for each topic, we have 2 points of view, the employer and the worker. So you will be able, by playing a game, in entering the shoes either of the worker, either of the employer, to understand the different challenges. The first topic is protection. So team 1 and 2 are focusing on how can we protect the employee. For example, we have a team in US working in the supermarket. When you are a worker in a supermarket, how can you expect to be protected? We have a team 2 in Lebanon working in the pharmacy. When you are dealing with a very specific field and industry and people rely on you, how can you manage your pharmacy with such constraint? Then we have topics related to decision, the right to removal. So what is the right to removal? Is when you can estimate that you have a critical, serious, imminent danger. To do this, we have 2 teams working on transport industry mostly. So we have a team working with pilot and steward in the airports, and a team working in the public transportation in France, and that's a huge challenge. And then, once we have decided in the organization, the new way we are going to work, mostly we are going to work from home, as we are currently doing today. But what is organized for the worker and the employer working remotely? So we have 6 teams, 3 topics, and 2 points of view. To do this, the 26 students have created these 6 teams according to 3 time zones. They are everywhere in the world. So instead of taking the alphabetical order, the first question we got for them is, where are you located? What is your time zone? They have elected a team leader, which is I would say the game master of this guild. And during 1 month, we are doing this online quest. We use the following tools: Zoom, Moodle, WhatsApp. For each of the 6 teams, we are doing 12 meetings, 1 meeting per level. Each meeting is a 30-minute meeting on Zoom with 2 experts, me for gamification, and we have catering for the International Labour Office on the OSH topic, occupational safety and health. So it's a lot of meetings, and it's a lot of go, no-go situation. The idea is that each team is going at its own speed, I would say, following a quest. This quest is split in 12 levels or steps. For example, you have to understand your topics, define the context of use and key performance indicators, identify dilemma, defining pedagogical framework, finding resources, writing feedbacks, defining scenario, establishing scoring, improving the scene because you have to create avatars and so on, recording voices, packaging the game, preparing the facilitator guides, and presenting the work. To be clear, today we are at step 8. Next week, they will have finished their work. So it's a sprint split in 12 levels. Let's take one example of one of the team. So it's a team of women only, and there are 5 members in this team. 2 are located in Netherlands, 1 in Lebanon, 1 in Germany, and 1 in France. They are focusing on the protection step, and they are working in the employer perspective. So they have decided to work on the case of pharmacy, and pharmacy are very important, represent very important needs today. So they need to stay open, but with very specific constraints, I would say. So the first step that they have done is to do interviews. So it would be online interviews with different personae, like in a user-centric approach. They have to define the different personae, the different stakeholders, identify the dilemma. Should they stay open? What are the challenges? What if we close the shop in terms of cost, in terms of needs for the population? Once they have done this, they have organized a pedagogical framework. They have defined a scenario, and then they need to give a name, to find the slogan, and package everything. So for the moment, I say for the moment because we have a lot of iteration. We meet 2 or 3 times per week. Each time we meet, they modify and improve things. For the moment, the name of their game is Pharma Plus, Pandemic Panic, with this logo. It can change till next week. The very first step that they are doing is not the fun step. It's a very complex step, I would say, which is analyzing the pedagogical framework. So they need to identify what is beyond, what are the norms, what are the challenges according to the different countries, and so on. Then they need to explain what will be the feedback for the learner, what are the pedagogical outcomes. They need to write it down very properly and find additional resources, because we are not just creating games, we are creating serious games. The goal is that the player at the end will go further, read more, watch more, improve the knowledge and skills. So we need to encourage the learner to do so, and it's part of the work of the students to create this. I will give you a short demo of the tools that they are using, but before that, I would like to give you a sense of what is a learning guild according to me. At the very beginning, let's say level 1, students were learning from the expert. To be clear, they were learning from me and Catherine as the 2 experts of gamification and occupational safety and health, from the method and from the content. So we were sending them thousands of pages and documents and YouTube video and TEDx talk just to enrich all the content. 1 week later, they were developing peer-to-peer learning. For example, and to be clear, they were much better than us to use the authoring tools that we were using. So they have started suggesting different tips. So I have asked them to record their tips, develop tuto video, and now we are sharing all this tuto video in the intake to improve this. Now, currently, we are in level 3. Level 3, they are going to teach us different things. For example, about the content. Imagine that you have 26 students spread all over the world, paying attention to this topic, reading all the news regarding a certain law. And for example, they will detail what is happening in one country regarding one practice. And they will give us a very up-to-date content for this. It will be also about the method itself. For example, we are using a software. The software is interesting. Still, 2 weeks after starting the game design session, students were suggesting improvement. Just take one example. One of the games is dedicated to home office. And in all the environments that are provided in this type of tools, there is only very classical office, call center, desk, front desk, and so on. So now the software editor is developing very specific context to represent this environment. Moreover, in a lot of social interaction now, we are supposed to wear masks, and we need the avatars to be able to wear masks and to show at the same time their emotion. So we are wondering how the software can integrate this now. Just before I give you a short demo, what I would like you to understand is that when we develop a game, we have a sentence to understand if the game is good. If the game is good, we are saying, you come for the game, you stay for the guild. In this case, what we hope is that students were coming from gamification seminar to improve method and so on, and that they will stay for the guild, know much more about the context and even challenge the content and create their own learning processes. This is what we expect, and all the games, the 6 games prototypes, will be delivered next week. So what I suggest is, just to give you a sense of what they are currently doing, is to show you one of the game prototype at this moment. Okay. Just can you confirm that you see the screen, the game screen now? François, is it okay? No.
Not yet.
So
we are still on your PowerPoint.
That's it. So I need to change.
All good.
Good. So it's a prototype. And so today is the first day that you are flying since the virus spread in France. You're aware of the critical situation in China and Italy where it affected transportation. You are in Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, right before your duty with British Airways. You're meeting and exchanging with thoughts with your friend Leah, the stewardess working for Air France. Let's see if you can hear the voices. I'm not sure that with Zoom it's easy to share them. Let's check.
Yeah, we don't hear we don't have any sound, but we can read the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are voices that you cannot hear. It's hard to share these voices with you on Zoom. Just to make you understand that my students are not game designers, they are not developers. So basically what they are doing in, let's say, 1 month, which represent for each of them 40 hours of work minimum, minimum. They are going to work on the content, but also on the shape of the game itself. They have not designed the character and avatars, they have pre-selected them, but they have to imagine the emotion, the attitudes, and also to write down all the verbatims, all the scoring, and then record their own voices to make it not just real, but to understand if someone else can use it. And then at the end of each interaction, we can click on a choice. And the choice is bringing us a step further in a decision process. And we can discuss, so for example, we are discussing. So I'm just clicking to show you how we can interact, as I point. To give you an idea, to develop 1 minute of game, it represents 1 day for 5 people. Here we are creating a game design session of 5 till 10 minutes of interaction with 45 minutes of resources. When you come to the end, you will have a scoring here. As you can see, the level design is not completed because you don't have a good distribution. You will be able to click and to have a customized feedback and additional resource. This is just a short demo to see what they are doing. For us, we consider that this process is like entering in a fab lab and cooperating together remotely to test, iterate, and improve knowledge on a certain topic. And they share this knowledge because at the end of next week, we are going to gather all this game into a complete tool. So this is it. If you have any question, I will be happy to answer. I guess that some of my students are also online, and we have also the expert from ILO with us.
Thank you, Hélène, for this presentation, showing us how it works. So there are a few questions already for you before we extend the topic, but while we are specifically on your presentation, we had one question of what is the end goal? I guess, what are the learning outcomes that, I mean, the written one and the unwritten ones that you have for the students after this module?
Okay. So my students are not going to become game designer, or maybe, but that's not the challenge of their training program. They are going to become human resource manager. We aim them to be able to handle a critical situation and identify a relevant learning program for this. In the future, they won't be the one designing completely the program. We would like them to understand the power of gamification and maybe to address the relevant game editor and understand the key performance indicator of all this. The best way to do this is to manipulate the concept.
We also have a question from someone who is also developing serious games, Sophia, all the way from Malaysia. Is asking you, how is gamification different from game-based learning? I guess a technical question.
Gamification, we are going to take a very complex topic and use the game mechanism to make it more accessible. It doesn't mean to make it fun, but more accessible. In game-based learning, we can create a complete game. Gamification could be you take a tool like Zoom and you want to gamify Zoom. You are going to enter in the software and integrate mechanism in this. In the specific gamification seminars that we are doing with the student, this year we are doing game. We are creating a game. In another type of context, we could have gamify an experience, for example, create an escape room or gamify Zoom. But that's true. This year we are creating complete game that are made on purpose with a very serious outcome.
I understand. Now, if we want to expand a bit the scope, I mean, there's the question of virtual learning communities, and we have to put in context that for certainly many of the people in the audience, they are very new to online learning. I mean, both of us, we have been doing that for too many years, but it's not the case of all of us in the audience. So I've got a question. I will turn to virtually turn to David and Travis. How do you see that innovating, entrepreneuring, co-creating is still possible in a virtual world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that tools just like the one that Ellen mentioned and kind of gave us a walkthrough for is a really kind of exciting new frontier for a lot of entrepreneurs. They need to figure out how to test things rapidly and quickly in this kind of new odd scenario that they're in order to really find out where their product market fit is eventually.
David?
Yeah, I think what I liked about the presentation is that there have to be instructional connection points in terms of the interaction, what's valued, what's effective for the students and for the faculty interaction. So I think that portrayed that extremely well. When you look at the new online, I think we're looking for a silver bullet right now because we're thrown into this. And I think the entrepreneur and innovative disciplines will help take this to the next level because there are vacuums, I think, that we do have to fill.
In terms of the student engagement, which is a key for a learning community, I mean, student, or it can be a group of people working on a startup or innovating or etc. What do you think are the most important ingredients? I mean, Hélène, for example, you mentioned the notion of guild, or the concept of guild. So is it what we need to create? Is it the purpose? I mean, how do you see that working the best for the students and for us as academic when we teach in a virtual world?
So I see that some of my students are participating to the webinar, and maybe they will be more relevant than me to say why they are still committed to the project. But I think that there is one point which is very important. We are working on first, a real project, and second, on a very important project. And I think it's important to get people involved because it matters, because they can address something which is important, and maybe they can make a difference, a small difference, and so on. So I think that you need to collaborate and work on something that you feel makes sense, is relevant, and can impact. And if you select this type of case, you have done 50% of the job, I would say, for students' engagement, and also for teachers' engagement. Because to be clear, I am doing with them 12 meetings with 6 teams each time. So even if it's my job to make so many meetings and to get committed to this, I need to believe in the topic I'm working on. Not just the method, but the content itself, that we are supposed to make a difference, that we can be useful doing this.
If I could just add to that, I think what we find also something to be aware of is the students we currently have already met each other when they started this semester. So when we start the summer semester for the degree programs in the fall, if we're online, they've never had that bonding experience that entrepreneurs, I think, value, especially if we have trust centers and we have centers that cater to that. So how do we then create opportunities for them to have that experience? And we could think of things like hackathons that the students do. But I also think it's important that we do kind of a voice of the customer for entrepreneurs to find out what they're thinking as we design what's going to happen in the fall with online and also with the summer learning.
Just to add my piece, I think that informal community is really important during this time too. And I'm sure every one of us has been invited to be a part of a happy hour or something like that. But I think that finding ways to connect with people that are less serious is really important during this time in order to kind of get some of the serious stuff done remotely.
Yeah, because it's I mean, the point that you made, David, is important because for most of us, in case they have met already before the confinement, but because we don't know about the future, we may have cases of students who never met. I mean, in my case, I've been teaching to executive MBAs fully online, so they never met, and they will never meet. And me, I don't meet with them, I mean, physically at least. But this is an important issue because, and especially for innovating and for entrepreneurship-related activities, is how do we develop online communities which are effective and efficient and I mean in the context of a module, of a course, of something which is as a mark at the end, but also generally to have an impact. So how do you think? What do you think are the key ingredients to achieve that? Hélène mentioned the something meaningful, something with an impact, but it's not always feasible. I mean, if we teach accounting 101, well, it may, but it can be a bit more difficult. So what are the ingredients in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's important. I know we've been talking about doing breakout rooms and kind of action labs on the side where the students can actually congregate. We've had some faculty say that that they're actually working harder and more determined now with these different delivery support mechanisms to be conducive for that. So I think we have to be very creative with options like that. I also think, to your point, Francois, the faculty find this exhausting in terms of twice the time, and students actually are learning, are visualizing 2 times faster and all of this. So how do you make sure that they're not bored sitting alone? Because the student interaction with one another is another key part of the learning process, especially for entrepreneurs. So how to create opportunities for that. We can think about doing other breakout sessions from the lectures. I've had faculty saying, disperse the lectures. Ours are about an hour and a half at MIT. How do you combine that with maybe a webinar and a lecture and a breakout, and maybe having some student-led conversations? I also think that distractions, we have to be careful with technology, as we saw here this morning. Maybe we design digital coaches that help with this. That's a combination of a TA and an IT person that allows the students then to break out into these different venues. But I really think that we should have the entrepreneurial students also come up with some of these solutions, working with the faculty, again, with my other comment, where there's going to be a void that we don't understand right now coming in the fall, because I think we're just scrambling right now. And hopefully there'll be some great entrepreneurial ideas or sessions. Again, I said hackathons, but think tanks that can develop from this and working with those faculty. I also think if the faculty, if we can provide a resource for the faculty for all the disciplines and all departments, even with GBSN, to get tricks of the trade or things that they're finding. So it's not just anecdotal, but it's factual. And I think that's another challenge that we're going to have to balance this out.
How do you think, maybe back to Hélène, to one of the questions, I mean, I will rephrase, but do you think that having a support system like this, like serious games and or gamification that you are doing, is something which is important to have? I mean, this or something else for the success of virtual learning? I mean, compared to, let's say, basic solutions where there would be content and a few forums and that's it?
So the very good point with this tool, which is relying on gamification with avatars and context and so on, it creates a protected environment, which is a key point of a game. A game is a protected environment. In this protected environment, you can experiment, you can fail, you can iterate, you can try again. So now imagine that I have my students and I need to teach innovation in human resource management, and I have 12 meetings with them. After 1 or 2 meetings, maybe one of the team is presenting, the other is presenting, and so on. But here what is happening basically is that one of the students is going to say, I'm sharing my screen and we are going to test the game. It's a bit like, enter with me in the Fab Lab, we are going to see how the prototype is working. So I'm not judging exactly them, I'm judging their project through what they are presenting, avatars, discussing, voices, you know. So it's very important for at least 2 reasons. The first one is they are much more committed because, you know, even if you have a complex part, The fun part is you record your own voices, you select a name for your avatar, you make it lively. To be honest, when my students have done the interview, what they have done, for example, for one of the cases, one of my students, Liz, she has interviewed, one of the interviewees was her father, who was facing this home office situation. In Lebanon, it was a friend of Anna, who was the owner of a pharmacy. So they're, opening their network, asking for interviews, getting people committing the project, asking, so have you finished it? Can we see it? So it's becoming more global, in sense of community. It's porosity, not just teaching 26 students, but creating a global sense of community around this project. So this is the first thing. We try to make it realistic, lively, integrate the affect part of the student, and also it's protective and it's fun. It's fun not because it's fun because, instead of saying, show me again your PowerPoint, it's, can we click on this? Can you see what happens if we take this decision? Can we try to solve it together? Do you have an idea or a tip? Can you share it? Please record a video, share it with all the intake. So it's much more interactive for all of us.
Maybe I know that we have one of the students, Anna, with us today. Maybe Anna, if you could share in a few minutes what are your views and your experience. I think that this module started a few weeks ago. So what do you think is great, and maybe what do you think could be improved? Hélène will not listen to this second part of the question. So if we can give the mic to Anna.
Hello, yes, I'm muted myself. Can you all hear me? Just nod your head so you don't have to unmute yourself. Great. Okay, so in the beginning of the serious game, we were all kind of hesitant as to how relevant this would be in implying it to HR. But through the process, we learned that day to day, everything's changing. Due to the pandemic, we all had to work from home. Our teachers had to teach us from home. There's so many distractions here. So if you don't do a more relevant and engaging way to teach students, then you won't get to them. So through serious games, we found that it could be a completely new platform of learning, but not just for students, but also for employees. It's interesting to see how to define what kind of scenarios you want to put in. You really have to dig into the research, maybe do some virtual surveys and interviews to find out what the most relevant and real life examples could be, and what examples could actually possibly happen in the real world, in the workforce right now. And that's what we had to do. And through that, we learned of scenarios, and we implemented scenarios which could happen so the players can be more prepared as to what's about to come.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your views, and we may come back to you if we have other questions specifically on your views and your feelings on this course. David and Travis, based on your experience at MIT, one of the issues is of course, how do we answer to some of the fears that the faculty may have with this new or different way of learning, or at least if a little bit was done virtually, now it's 100%. So how do we ensure that the faculty remain in maybe not in their comfort zone, but not too far from their comfort zone, and are able to focus on the content and the delivery?
Sure. I'm happy to go first. So for my program, the Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, what we're doing is we have an eye to the future when we will be in person again. And I think that's really important. Not that this is a substitute, or this is kind of it is an unfortunate situation, but we're able to leverage what we have right now, this kind of virtual community, in plan for what we're actually going to do when we're all together for our program in particular. A lot of the teams that we work with are doing the same, where they have, really grand plans to start, new incubators, accelerators, new entrepreneurial kind of support systems in their regions. And they're trying to kind of figure out, okay, we're going to allocate, you know, resources here. This is how we're going to roll this out once we're all back together. And they have, you know, a set of milestones that they're able to plan for in the future and use this as a really kind of strategic time rather than an implementation time.
David?
I would add that I think there's some givens that you have to have the technical support taken care of for the faculty. Your IT person, have someone on site, et cetera, have a TA do the chats or read the chats so there are no distractions. I think you have to have those as givens. I think the second thing would be, can you partner with another faculty, maybe to we've done this before, to share maybe a lecture or webinar or some online learning that you're doing. I also think it'll be important for us to consider if at MIT in the fall, let's say we do have in-person classes, there may be international students that may not be able to get here. So how do you balance the online with actually in classroom too? And I think that's something that we'll have to look at with the faculty. I like that the gaming part is maybe introduce a new part of the curriculum that the faculty may want to experiment with that we don't have right now. And that could be even working with intern programs. Could also be working cross among schools so that the students feel that that consistent learning that they're having is not just online in the classroom. So I think we have to be careful that we just don't take what we have now and just try to wedge it in to a technological solution that will have to change the curriculum. And the most important part of this will be the voice of the student.
On this part also, we had a question, and I guess, I mean, for most of us, and definitely at Grenoble and at MIT, about the cultural challenges. Again, when we welcome a new class of students, and you could have students basically from all over the world, we always have some ice-breaking, including cultural ice-breaking sessions, and can be also some sessions specifically on intercultural behaviors and etc. that we have to make sure that people from very, very different backgrounds and very different parts of the world can work together in a classroom. How do you see that happening or not happening for the next cohort? I mean, are there things that you're already discussing on how to handle that?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think that, of course, all of us have onboarding, right, orientations when students start the degree programs. And as you know, the cohort is probably the most important bonding experience in the beginning. So I think that we're going to have to take this and just, you know, wrap it up in terms of adding more to this orientation. I also think for international students or global students, you may want to rely on your alumni network so that you have mentors during orientation. Maybe match them with the same degree program. Do ones who have just graduated, ones who maybe have been in the system for a longer time, to help with the orientation, these different areas. So you have points of contact all over the globe for these orientations and these cohorts. And I think that the EQ part of this in terms of psychological bonding is going to be extremely important in the beginning, and making sure that you're going to replace all the touch points when they're being on campus with other type of interesting organizational type activities like gaming, virtual tours of the campus, even getting some companies, maybe alumni, who can do virtual tours within there for other type things. But I think the bonding part online is going to be very important in the beginning orientation. Those are just some ideas that I can throw out.
Hélène, do you have any comments on that?
To be clear, we for next year, even if I love, you know, face-to-face learning, teaching, because I am also a Lego serious play facilitator. I have a dedicated playground where people experiment real games. So I just love, you know, in real life situation, especially in gamification. But to be clear, now we are getting organized to deliver this completely online, starting again next September or October, I would say. And we will certainly start with this type of program, gamification, because it can also have a positive externality, which is onboarding. Because through this project, you are getting this sense of community, you are delivering an output in a short period of time, and so on. We can also imagine to have an icebreaker online, and so on and so on. So we estimate that this gamification seminar could be a good way to start with an intake, to start the program. And in general, we use this type of seminar mostly at the end of the academic year. Once they have all the content, they are more ready to integrate this in another innovative tool. Now we are doing this in a reverse way. We flip completely the classroom. We start by this approach, and they are going through this approach to get the content they need, the skills, and so on and so on. So it will be not just a technical constraint that we are taking into consideration. We are trying to build the knowledge in another way, using this gamification seminar as a method for onboarding and building knowledge and community.
I guess that, I mean, the issues that we will face is the type of issues that we have also in a physical classroom anyway sometimes. I mean, what I mean is that when I teach online sometimes, and mostly on the forums interaction part, sometimes I have to be very active, and some other cohorts, they just talk and learn, and when I participate, it's almost as if I was disturbing them, you know. And what you see online like this happening is also sometimes what you see in a classroom, where from one group to another it's more or less difficult, and sometimes you don't really understand why it's more difficult with one group to another from another to have this bond, or to make them work, participate, interact. So I guess that we have the same issues, in fact, in virtual learning. There were some questions, I mean, again, very practical ones that we all have now that we all switch to virtual learning. How much do you need? It's important to monitor the activities in terms of quantity and quality.
I think extremely important. In fact, we're having some of our professors who are experts in data analytics look at this in terms of surveying the students and the faculty. I also think it's very important, we're focusing on faculty and students, that your administrative teams, such as whoever runs the student affairs groups, you know, I think there's going to be a challenge for them to make sure that they're providing the resources for the students to go to if there are issues that they have with online learning, that they have with their breakout sessions. So I think that's something that the resource component of this will be very important to provide accessibility.
And so, Hélène, for example, are you monitoring a lot, including formally monitoring, or even having a participation mark or something like this?
In fact, it's a lot of qualitative approach. To be clear, this program requires a level of customization which is so high that it will be complex to address a larger audience. To be clear, we are two facilitators, me for the gamification part, all the method, and someone dedicated to the content. So we validate the internal validity of two things, the content and the mechanism. Each time we have 12 go, no-go sessions. And when we do this, the team of students are teams of 5 students, which means that you can see all their faces, and we ask them to open their video camera, because it's important also to see their emotion, how they are, where they live, if it's in context, and we start with small talk and so on. So I don't need, to be clear, I don't need a check mark. I know all of them. I even know what does their flat look like, their desk, you know, their cat, because I can see, I know that, for example, Thomas is wearing a straw hat sometimes. I know that, I know them very, very well, but it would be very difficult, sorry, to replicate this seminar for a larger scale. Why does it work? So why do we keep this seminar, which is so precise? It's also because we are going to use this output. We are not just training students. They are creating a new knowledge. To be clear, the 6 games prototype, we are collaborating with the International Labour Organization. These games are going to present it at ILOs in different conferences. This game, the serious game editor has already asked a co-branding approach to release the games once finished. We know that we can use these games in other type of contexts, in executive education or in training program, once they will be completely finished. But we are not just delivering a training, we are creating a new knowledge. So we take time because we have different types of outputs for the organizational part.
Understand. So you you know that for many academics, because of the urgency of the switch, moving from face-to-face to online meant going to Zoom or Teams, and instead of 1 hour of lecture, of workshop, face-to-face, doing it through Zoom or Teams or whatever. Do you think that it can last doing that? Because some of them seems to be quite happy with that finally, and students, because maybe it's new, so far they seem also to be okay with the idea that, okay, it's not in a class, it's by distance, but it's still 1 hour or 80 minutes or 90 minutes of whatever, with the prof talking and us taking notes and etc. Do you think that it can last? I mean, do you have plans to? I mean, I don't know if you are doing that at MIT, but do you have plans to change that? Do you have plans to train the faculty? I mean, how do you see the future of also enhancing the skills of the faculty in case we have to teach online more and more often? Maybe Travis and
yeah, I'm happy to say it. Okay.
Sorry, I think we have to explore the technology. I don't think it's where we want it to be right now. So I think there's more to be done with that. I also think there's a psychological study that we have to do in terms of the impact of this from the faculty and the staff and administration. As I said earlier, we're just reacting right now. We're trying to get everything in order. And I think in the next couple of months, we should be looking at what other options do we have to enhance this to make it better than it is, and also to try to form a new dynamic. And to Ellen's point, I think we have to do quantitative analysis with this to find out what trends that we're seeing, what is the impact that we really want out of these, because it is going to be a new normal for student expectations. How do we get that? They're not going to have the same experience in the short term that they expected when they started applying to our schools. And the other part I can't stress enough is, how do we define community? From an entrepreneurial standpoint, from a learning standpoint, from the recruitment, that's why they're coming to our schools, is so that they can be recruited, get great positions when they leave or start their own companies. How do we enhance that community? Because all of you know, the reason that you come to these schools is so that when you leave, you have this profound network, right, of resources, of friends. So when you start a company, when you do a startup, when you want to land something, you have these resources. So how do we preserve that integrity and that outcome with the technology?
Something I might just add to that is, from the faculty's perspective, and what I've heard our faculty say, is that it's much more exhausting to do teaching this way. And so what we've actually found really helpful for our program is actually to have co-delivery with faculty, where you're using your TA or one of the other people that are supporting the faculty in a different way, whether it's staff or TA, and allowing the faculty to facilitate the conversation between each other rather than just have one single presenter. We've seen that actually create a really interesting kind of connection with the students. They're much more receptive, and they give you a lot more feedback in some ways, because one is able to really teach and the other is almost able to kind of facilitate the conversation and summarize questions, almost as we're doing here, in a way that kind of keeps the conversation going and the momentum of the lecture, rather than kind of interrupting, checking the Q&A, or having a TA interrupt at the wrong moment. So we're seeing that as kind of this kind of a learning adaptation to a really smooth presentation to this new media. It's really interesting to watch.
I just want to add to that, the exhaustion is, it's been, two faculty said it's like when you do simultaneous translation, you know, in terms of waiting and that and adding on to it. But that was, for those of you who are trying to understand the exhaustion part, that was a metaphor analogy that was used.
Yeah. No, I understand. I mean, to share my own feelings. I mean, when I used to tell people that I was teaching, I mean, colleagues, academics that I was teaching online, they used to look at me like if I was some sort of, I don't know, not a real academic. And now I think they realize, it's not nice to say that, but they realize that it's a real job and a very demanding one. One aspect also of our teaching and the way we do lots of our activities in business schools is through collaborations, and both David and Travis and Hélène also, I mean, an international collaborations and all sorts of partnerships and things happening. And I mean, we all are used to fly a lot, or we were used to fly a lot, and or receive people, or etc. Lots of movements. How do you see that evolving? Let's say again, we are deconfined and reconfined in September or whatever. How do we see that moving on?
Well, I'll just jump in quickly. We have to go to online right now. That's our option. I think in order to enhance the relationships, we're trying to do joint webinars and lecture series that we find are interesting, and topics that we find are vital, not to just society, but also to the coursework that these students are doing. But at this time, there's optimism, of course, that we will get through this. There's optimism that you know, we'll perfect online learning where we need to. But the bottom line is, I think for a lot of our international partners, is that they can't wait, you know, to get back in a year or 3 years or whatever. So the focus is what do we do for this class, so they're not kind of deemed the sacrificial class because of this pandemic. What can we do to enhance that experience? So right now, I could just say that we're all looking at digital options because of visa issues, transportation, and we don't know, you know, in terms of second, third waves, we just have to be careful. But it's hard not traveling, I will say that.
I've discussed with some deans. I mean, some of them are telling me that they are even considering to switch to fully online, or some of their programs that were face-to-face programs, because finally they realize that it works. Or some of them also telling me, well, I could imagine some time in the year where the school is totally empty, and other times in the year where, on the contrary, everybody is in the school, which is also never the case. We never have all the students together. So sometimes like this, where basically the configuration and the way the teaching is done will be very different. Is it also something, I mean, Hélène, Travis, and David, that you are discussing among colleagues or with your deans, or?
Even before this pandemic, we were starting discussion about traveling, you know, the impact of traveling for the academics and so on. And when you organize a conference yourself, when you move to another conference. And we had a discussion about, it's a very good article, I will share it on the comments side, a very good article about how we can use the 3R decision process that the pharmaceutical industry had adopted when they had to decide if they were going to use or test the treatment on animals. So before testing on any animals, medical treatment. Can you reduce? Can you replace? Can you refine? Can we reduce face-to-face learning just in case? Or even maybe sometimes it's comfortable to work from home. Or just in case we cannot move anymore. Can we replace with something which is corresponding or better and so on, using games or whatever? Can we refine? If we do it, can we create a complete experience and give the best in the situation? Not just make people coming to attend a PPT presentation and so on. So now the more I'm working in this perspective, the more I'm adopting this 3R decision process. Can I reduce traveling? Can I replace? Can I refine? And it's the same for face-to-face learning. Can I reduce? Can I replace? can I refine? And yeah, this will be my challenge for the next 2 years, I guess.
Travis and David, some last words on that, on the future before we close, because we are already at the 60 minutes.
So I can go. Just from our perspective, our program was already partially remote and online. We have these action learning cycles where they're in the classroom part of the time, and then they're doing practical work for part of the time. And what we're seeing is that there's so much value, more value than we maybe even realized in the beginning with the online piece, that we're starting to figure out how do we develop new content so that when things go back to a more normal reality, what else can we add to those virtual sessions and make that action learning cycle even more succinct?
Yeah, I'll just add, with unlike other tragedies maybe we faced in our lifetime, we're all in this at the same time and together. So it kind of level sets us so that no one has an advantage over someone else. And I think that a lot of wonderful innovations are going to come out of that in terms of how we learn in the future and how we establish global relationships. So I'm optimistic about that.
Well, thank you very much for this optimistic last words. 60 minutes is a very short amount of time to go through all the topics. I hope that we have answered all the questions. You will receive certainly an email from GBSN with all of our emails. So don't hesitate to contact us after this webinar if you have any specific or other questions on we are more than happy to support you in your switch to online learning and help you make it a smooth experience. Online learning is great. Online learning is, or virtual learning can be even richer than physical one. So I don't think that you should be afraid of that. There is a bit of learning curve, but everything will go well. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we hope to see you soon for another webinar with GBSN. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.